The moment we decided humanity's fate, the stars themselves seemed to dim. I remember the sound first. Not voices, those were translated into sterile harmonics by the conclave's acoustic field, but the underlying vibration of ancient bodies shifting in agreement, chitin against crystal, tendrils brushing marble, plasma-veiled entities flickering in cold approval. The Grand Conclave Chamber had endured supernova refugees, galactic plagues, civilizational extinctions. It had never trembled. Until the word enslavement was formalized into law. Above us, holographic constellations drifted across the vaulted ceiling, mapping territories that had belonged to our species for epochs. Beneath that artificial firmament, 12 dominant civilizations cast their votes regarding a single volatile world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, Earth. The verdict was nearly unanimous. Humanity was classified as unstable, expansionist, dangerously adaptive. Their technological ascent had outpaced predictive models by 2 centuries. Their cultural broadcasts, art, war simulations, philosophical debates, revealed a species obsessed with improvement. Worse, they did not fracture under pressure. Sanctions strengthened them. Isolation accelerated them. They had refused to kneel when presented with protective oversight. And so, as empires have always done when confronted with a potential rival, we chose chains. I observed from my elevated station, recorder tendrils extended, documenting history. Across the chamber floor stood the human delegation, 3 figures in dark formal attire, fragile bone structures wrapped in synthetic fibers, no visible weapons, no defensive exoshells, just soft skin and forward-facing eyes. They did not protest. They did not plead. They simply watched us. That was the first miscalculation. We interpreted their silence as powerlessness. Later, I would understand it as assessment. When the final vote crystal illuminated, enslavement decree approved, the chamber resonated with satisfaction. Economic projections scrolled across shared displays, resource acquisition models, labor integration forecasts. Earth's oceans mined, its industries absorbed, its population redistributed across controlled territories. It was efficient, profitable, clean. The human delegates requested permission to transmit a final statement. Granted. The tallest among them, a female by our biological indexing, stepped forward. Her heart rate, visible through our sensors, remained steady. Her pupils did not dilate. Her voice, when translated, carried no tremor. "We acknowledge your decision," she said. No anger, no fear, only that. Then they departed. No threats, no defiance, no emotional display. Several delegates expressed amusement. One remarked that primates often freeze before submission. Another predicted planetary surrender within 72 standard hours of fleet arrival. Our intelligence division supported this confidence. Earth's orbital defenses were modest, their fleet tonnage insignificant compared to the combined armadas of the Conclave. Their colonies, Mars, Luna, scattered outer system habitats, were economically dependent and strategically vulnerable. Human political structures appeared fragmented, competing nation-states, rival corporations, ideological divisions. They would fracture under pressure. They always had, according to their own historical archives. We had studied their wars, global conflicts fought with atomic fire. We had studied their plagues, their climate crises, their economic collapses. Each catastrophe had nearly ended them. Nearly. That word should have concerned us more. Within 1 standard hour of the vote's ratification, conclave fleets began mobilization toward the Sol system. Carrier groups assembled in elegant formations. Dreadnoughts powered singularity cores. Automated subjugation platforms prepared atmospheric compliance protocols. It was to be swift, overwhelming, educational. Then Earth went silent. At first, we attributed it to communication disruption, perhaps civil panic overwhelming their networks. But as monitoring arrays recalibrated, a deeper anomaly emerged. Their military encryption grids vanished from our intercept range. Civilian satellite clusters shifted orbits simultaneously, aligning into geometric patterns inconsistent with communication arrays. Shipyards that had previously constructed modest exploration craft initiated full-spectrum power surges, then disappeared from long-range scans. Not destroyed, moved. Entire orbital facilities altered trajectory using propulsion signatures we had not cataloged. On Mars, surface installations powered bound in coordinated sequence, plunging colonies into deliberate darkness. This was not chaos, it was choreography. Emergency analytics flooded the conclave chamber. Projected surrender probability dropped from 92% to 61%, then 40%, then, alarmingly, indeterminate. A murmur spread through the assembly. I accessed deeper surveillance archives, tracing human data channels. Their public networks had indeed gone silent. Entertainment streams, commercial transmissions, open scientific forums, all offline. In their place, encrypted military bandwidth expanded exponentially. Resource allocation shifted planet-wide. Civilian manufacturing converted to unknown production models. Transportation grids rerouted toward subterranean complexes long dismissed as old Cold War relics. They were not panicking. They were preparing. I replayed human history, searching for precedent. Ice ages that reduced their population to genetic bottlenecks, world wars that insulated continents, pandemics that suffocated cities. Each time they had hovered at extinction's edge. And each time they had reorganized, faster, stronger, more unified. A realization began forming within my neural lattice, an analog pattern older than language. Humanity did not respond to existential threat with surrender. They responded with transformation. In the conclave chamber, celebration dimmed into cautious recalculation. Fleet commanders requested updated engagement parameters. Some delegates suggested accelerating orbital strikes before Earth completed whatever mobilization it had initiated. Others dismissed the concern. Plasma beings declared a frightened species posturing. Yet the data contradicted comfort. Human colonies beyond Sol initiated similar silence protocols. Merchant vessels diverted course without explanation. Even their diplomatic envoys in neutral systems requested immediate extraction. Everywhere, the same pattern: consolidation, withdrawal, focus. And still, no threats, no declarations of defiance, only silence. As our first armada crossed into the outer boundary of the Sol system, long-range sensors detected something else: anomalous energy signatures embedded within the Kuiper belt. Not natural, not previously recorded, hidden, waiting. A tremor rippled through my exoskeleton, an instinctual warning encoded by ancestors who had survived predators in primordial oceans. We had assumed ourselves hunters, but hunters who underestimate prey often become casualties of their own arrogance. I requested permission to append a cautionary note to the official record. Denied. Humanity lacks the capacity for meaningful resistance, the High Arbiter stated. Their silence confirms fear. Perhaps, or perhaps it confirmed discipline. As fleet after fleet advanced toward Earth's inner worlds, I watched Sol's yellow star flare gently against the darkness. A small system, a young civilization, outmatched by every measurable metric. And yet the data refused to align with our expectations. For the first time since the Conclave's founding, I questioned a unanimous vote. Because in that engineered silence, something ancient had awakened. A species forged in catastrophe, refined by suffering, unified by threat. We believed we had voted for conquest. As our armadas accelerated toward Sol, weapons primed and compliance protocols ready, a single conclusion echoed through my consciousness with growing certainty. We had not voted to enslave a world. We had voted to test it, and I was no longer certain we would survive the result. We entered the Sol system as a monument to inevitability. Thousands of vessels translated from hyperspace in flawless synchronization. Warforms from 12 civilizations unfolding like a crown of iron around a minor yellow star. Dreadnoughts layered in overlapping shield matrices. Carrier spires releasing interceptor swarms. planet crackers holding position at the rear, silent reminders of ultimate consequence. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Conclave had achieved perfect military unity. Operation Iron Eclipse had begun. We expected resistance rhetoric, panicked broadcasts, pleas for negotiation. Instead, we found absence. The outer colonies were empty. Lunar shipyards drifted cold and powerless. Mining platforms in the asteroid belt had been dismantled with surgical precision, reactors removed, databanks wiped, structural cores destabilized to prevent capture. Even civilian habitats showed signs of controlled evacuation rather than disorder. No debris fields, no chaotic flight signatures. Just vacancy. "They flee," one fleet admiral signaled across the tactical lattice. "Advance to Mars orbit. Establish compliance perimeter." Our formations tightened as we crossed the orbit of Jupiter. Long-range scans revealed energy fluctuations within the asteroid belt, minor at first, easily dismissed as residual mining signatures. Then the belt ignited. Mass drivers, thousands of them, erupted from concealed housings embedded within tumbling rock. Asteroids previously catalogued as inert were revealed to be armored shells. Magnetic rails accelerated multi-ton projectiles at relativistic fractions, turning the belt into a storm of kinetic annihilation. Our forward shield lines absorbed the first volley. The second penetrated. A Virillian cruiser split open along its spine, atmosphere venting in a glittering plume. 2 Keth Dread escorts shattered as impact vectors bypassed their defensive harmonics. Autonomous targeting algorithms struggled to compensate. The projectiles were too numerous, too irregular. This was not a defensive wall. It was a slaughter corridor. "Return fire," came the command, but there was nothing stable to target. The mass drivers retracted into stone, shifting position through internal propulsion systems we had not detected. The asteroid belt was no longer terrain. It was a weapon. Our first wave lost 14 capital ships before clearing the field. Confusion rippled through the tactical network, an emotion rarely experienced by coordinated conclave forces. We had prepared for planetary sieges, fleet engagements, orbital bombardment. We had not prepared for infrastructure turned predatory. As we regrouped beyond Mars orbit, additional anomalies surfaced. Civilian cargo vessels, previously catalogued as evacuating refugees, altered course simultaneously. Their hull plating separated mid-flight, revealing weapon cores embedded beneath humanitarian insignia. Swarms of micro-missiles erupted from compartments once designated for agricultural equipment. Terraforming satellites, devices designed to seed atmospheres and stabilize climates, rotated in unison and discharged concentrated kinetic rods toward our midline formations. Humans had weaponized everything. There was no distinction between civilian and military asset, no clear front line. Every object in motion became a potential threat. Our admirals recalculated strategy: accelerate, overwhelm, crush Earth before these improvisations compounded. The second wave surged inward, heavier shielding deployed, point defense grids expanded. They advanced, only to discover that Mars was dark by design. Orbital scans indicated dormant reactors beneath the surface, subterranean networks stretching kilometers deep, heat signatures deliberately masked. We prepared planetary bombardment, and then our supply convoys began disappearing. Beyond Jupiter's orbit, automated refueling stations detonated seconds before docking procedures. Hyperlane relays flickered, transmitting corrupted navigational data that scattered reinforcement fleets into unstable translation points. Our command channels, encrypted through quantum entanglement, experienced interference. Not brute force jamming, intrusion. Human code infiltrated our relay systems with alarming subtlety. False targeting data propagated across shared networks. Friend or foe identifiers flickered uncertainly. In one catastrophic exchange, 2 allied fleets nearly engaged each other before emergency override protocols halted the error. They were not defending territory. They were attacking cohesion. Amid the chaos, I intercepted a narrow-band transmission riding the interference, a signal piggybacking on our own command frequencies. It bypassed firewalls not through force, but familiarity. The message was brief. 2 words in human linguistic structure,
translated effortlessly by our systems. You voted. That was all. No demand, no negotiation, no insult, only acknowledgement. The psychological impact rippled through the fleets more violently than any kinetic strike. The humans were not reacting blindly. They were executing a plan triggered by our decision. This was not desperation. It was doctrine. Our analysts projected adaptive behavior curves and found something deeply unsettling. Human countermeasures were evolving within hours. Shield frequencies we exploited during initial contact were recalibrated by the next engagement. Drone formations altered patterns after a single observed weakness. They were learning in real time.
"Deploy planetary sterilization platforms," demanded a Talarian war minister. "End this before it escalates." But sterilization required unanimous escalation approval, a protocol designed to prevent reckless annihilation. Hesitation entered the vote, because despite our losses, we were still winning engagements. On paper, we destroyed orbital stations, we disabled several concealed platforms, we forced human vessels into retreat toward Earth's inner orbit. Yet every victory extracted disproportionate cost. Every destroyed installation triggered secondary traps. Self-destructing cores released electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt specific conclave shield harmonics. Retreating human frigates lured pursuers into minefields seeded along unpredictable vectors. They retreated strategically, never collapsing, always buying time. Time for what? As we approached Earth's defensive perimeter, new ship signatures emerged from behind Luna, vessels constructed from hybridized hull architecture, designs unfamiliar, propulsion signatures modified beyond standard human specifications. They had integrated salvaged alien components into their own frameworks. Impossible according to our projections, and yet there they were. A skirmish near the lunar shadow demonstrated the extent of our miscalculation. A human cruiser deliberately exposed a shield weakness we had previously exploited. A conclave destroyer targeted the gap, precisely as anticipated. Moments before impact, the cruiser's shield polarity inverted, converting incoming plasma into redirected energy that lanced back through the destroyer's core. The weakness had been bait. Adaptation had become strategy. Within the conclave chamber, confidence eroded into something sharper. Unease edged with dawning comprehension. Humanity was not fighting to preserve infrastructure or territory. They were fighting to demonstrate a truth, that enslavement would cost more than coexistence. As casualties mounted, I reviewed ancient human war archives again. Their species had faced extinction repeatedly, ice ages that nearly erased them, weapons capable of planetary annihilation, pandemics that suffocated billions. Each time, survival had required innovation under pressure. We had assumed extinction was their fear. Now I began to suspect it was their instructor. Operation Iron Eclipse had been designed as a swift demonstration of superiority. Instead, it had become a crucible. And as our fleets prepared for full assault on Earth's orbital grid, a final report reached the conclave from frontline analysts. Projected human surrender probability, statistically negligible. Revised projection, prolonged conflict with escalating adaptive threat. In simpler terms, they were not afraid of dying. And a species that does not fear extinction cannot be coerced by it. Our armadas tightened formation, weapons charging for decisive engagement around Earth itself. But as I watched the blue world rotate beneath layered defense platforms, a chilling realization settled into my consciousness. We had entered Sol expecting submission. We were about to discover what humanity became when cornered, and I was no longer certain Iron Eclipse would survive the dawn. We searched for the flaw in their biology. That is how we always begin. When confronted with an adversary that resists expectation, the conclave dissects genetics, neurology, evolutionary history. Strength must come from superior design, denser muscle fibers, enhanced cognitive clusters, latent psionic potential. Humanity possessed none of these. Their skeletal frames were fragile by galactic standards. Their skin tore easily. Their neural processing speeds fell within average sapient ranges. They had no hive mind synchronization, No precognitive glands, no radiation-resistant exoshells. Individually, they were unremarkable. Collectively, they were becoming unstoppable. The answer did not lie in their flesh. It lay in their doctrine. Intercepted strategic files, recovered from a disabled Terran cruiser near Mars, revealed a phrase repeated across command hierarchies, civilian networks, and industrial directives: total mobilization. At first, we misinterpreted it as mere wartime escalation, but as deeper layers of encrypted archives unraveled, its true scope emerged. This was not a temporary measure. It was a cultural reflex. The moment the enslavement decree passed, Earth's political fractures sealed with astonishing speed. Rival nation-states suspended economic competition. Corporate entities surrendered patents into shared military databases. Civilian manufacturing plants converted to weapons production within hours. No riots, no governmental collapse. Their democracies, systems we deemed inefficient, compressed into focused instruments without dissolving into authoritarian chaos. Civilians became engineers, engineers became soldiers, soldiers became strategists. Every human role proved fluid under threat. Our sociologists were disturbed. Species that centralize too quickly often fracture internally. Panic spreads. Factions exploit instability. Humanity did the opposite. They synchronized. Historical archives explained why. We accessed their planetary data vaults expecting sanitized propaganda. Instead, we found brutal honesty. Millennia of recorded self-destruction. Global wars fought with chemical clouds and nuclear suns. Ideological conflicts that consumed continents. Economic collapses that starved millions. They had nearly annihilated themselves more than once. And yet, they endured. More unsettling still, they learned from each catastrophe. After nuclear brinkmanship brought them within minutes of extinction, they established deterrence doctrines to prevent repetition. After poisoning their atmosphere with industrial excess, they coordinated planetary repair initiatives. After pandemics decimated populations, they redesigned medical infrastructures. Extinction was not myth to them. It was memory. It was curriculum. When our fleets initiated orbital bombardment over Mars, expecting psychological collapse, human defense grids responded with precision we had not anticipated. Our first volley struck the surface, plasma lances carving glowing scars across red regolith. The dust cleared. The planetary shield held. Not perfectly, no shield is flawless, but enough. Hidden beneath Martian crust were layered energy absorbers calibrated specifically to conclave weapon signatures. The second volley met adaptive counterfrequencies. By the third, our bombardment efficiency had dropped by 37%. Then Mars retaliated. Kinetic projectiles launched from subterranean silos, their trajectories masked by atmospheric debris. 3 conclave flagships suffered direct impact along previously identified structural stress lines. They had studied our hull schematics. They had targeted weaknesses we ourselves had overlooked. On Europa, beneath frozen oceans we had deemed strategically insignificant, human forces enacted a maneuver that silenced the conclave chamber. Our ground contingents breached one of their subglacial facilities, a research installation converted into command nexus. Victory seemed certain. Communication intercepts suggested dwindling personnel. Then, the ocean ignited. Thermonuclear charges embedded along tectonic fault lines detonated in sequence. Entire sections of Europa's subsurface sea collapsed inward, crushing both human defenders and invading conclave units. They sacrificed the base, deliberately, to deny us leverage. They destroy their own assets, one delegate hissed during emergency session. Primitive irrationality. No, it was calculation. Humans valued survival over infrastructure, victory over territory, autonomy over resources. They would burn their own foundations before allowing them to be used as chains. That realization fractured something within the conclave. Species that voted confidently for enslavement began transmitting private inquiries, projected long-term casualty rates, economic sustainability of prolonged war, probability of full Terran technological parity. The answers were uncomfortable. Human adaptive velocity exceeded all prior projections. Their research output had tripled since the war's onset. Civilian universities converted into military think tanks. Open-source collaboration networks, once used for software development and scientific discourse, now optimized shield harmonics and propulsion refinements in real time. Every battlefield engagement became data for global analysis. We exploited a vulnerability in their drone swarm formations near Luna. Within hours, revised formations appeared, closing the gap permanently. We penetrated a communications relay through quantum tunneling disruption. The next day, their entire network architecture shifted to decentralized mesh arrays immune to the same exploit. It was as though the species shared a single, distributed mind, not through biology, but through culture.
Doctrine replaced instinct. Adaptation replaced fear. Inside the Grand Conclave chamber, tension coiled. Some species demanded escalation to planetary sterilization, deploying weapons capable of rendering Earth uninhabitable. End the experiment, argued a senior war minister, before their evolution surpasses containment. But unanimous consent required unanimous consent, and unanimity no longer existed. Several delegates hesitated, not from compassion, but from caution. If humanity survived even partial sterilization, what would emerge from the ashes? A species already tempered by catastrophe might interpret annihilation as further justification for escalation. Others questioned the political optics. The intercepted "You voted" transmission had circulated among civilian populations across conclave space. Public sentiment wavered. Why exterminate a species that had not initiated aggression? For the first time since the decree, moral calculus entered strategic discussion. Humanity was not collapsing. They were refining. Our war simulations, once predicting swift compliance, now extended into decades, projecting escalating Terran capability curves that intersected, then exceeded our own. And still, they did not seek conquest. Their counteroffensives targeted supply chains. Their cyber intrusions exposed only military secrets. Their communications emphasized sovereignty, not domination. This was not expansionist frenzy. It was defensive evolution. I reviewed a fragment from an ancient human philosopher uncovered in our cultural analysis. Pressure creates diamonds. A primitive metaphor, yet disturbingly accurate. We had applied pressure, and something crystalline was forming. As debate intensified within the conclave, another frontline report arrived, this one from the inner Martian orbit. Human shipyards, previously operating at known capacity, had unveiled a new class of vessel, hybridized, reinforced with salvaged alloy conclave alloys, equipped with shield matrices partially derived from our own technology, modified beyond recognition. They had not merely copied, they had improved. The chamber fell silent as holographic schematics rotated before us. If current adaptation rates persisted, analysts concluded, human fleets would achieve parity within cycles, superiority thereafter. For the first time, I perceived fear not as a tactical variable, but as a shared emotional reality among species who had long considered themselves untouchable. We had voted to enslave a world. Instead, we had triggered its transformation. And as our fleets prepared yet another assault on Earth's defensive perimeter, I understood with chilling clarity. Extinction had always been humanity's greatest adversary, which meant they had been training for us all along. The next engagement would determine whether the conclave could still control the narrative, or whether we had already lost the future. The shift did not announce itself with fanfare. It began with missing ships. At first, it was statistical noise, one supply convoy failing to exit hyperspace along a mapped corridor near the Persean transit lane. Then another, then three more, each vanishing beyond the safe coordinates our navigational guilds had certified for centuries. We assumed mechanical failure, pirate opportunists, local insurgencies emboldened by war. Then the wreckage drifted back. Fragments of hull plating emerged from unstable folds of space, scorched by weapon signatures disturbingly familiar. Blackened cargo containers spun in silence, their contents vented into vacuum. And embedded within one fractured command core, analysts discovered something that chilled even the most hardened war minister. Human code. Not scavenged fragments, integrated systems. They had intercepted our convoys outside Sol, which meant they had left their star. Frontier systems began reporting unidentified vessels, sleek, asymmetrical silhouettes translating from hyperspace with unprecedented precision. They struck military installations with impossible efficiency. Shipyards lost power seconds before targeted reactor implosions. Defense arrays rotated too late to intercept weapons that bypassed shield harmonics as if they had been custom designed. Because they had been. Captured conclave technology, salvaged from battlefields we believed secured, had not been studied for replication. It had been studied for improvement. Our propulsion methods, once thought proprietary to species that had mastered singularity containment for millennia, were modified for acceleration curves we deemed structurally unstable. Human vessels folded space with sharper vectors, appearing deeper within gravity wells than our safety protocols allowed. Our shield matrices, built on rigid harmonic consistency, were reconfigured by human engineers into dynamic lattices, flexible, adaptive, shifting frequency mid-impact to diffuse rather than resist. They did not copy our systems, they removed our limitations. The first confirmed engagement outside Sol occurred in the Keth Resource Cluster, a mining nexus critical to Conclave fleet production. 3 human warships translated into orbit and neutralized orbital defense platforms under 6 minutes. They avoided civilian population centers entirely. No atmospheric strikes, no infrastructure sabotage beyond military capacity. They targeted the shipyard, specifically its command spire. The message was unmistakable. We can reach you. We can dismantle you. We choose not to annihilate you. Their restraint terrified us more than devastation would have. Brutality could be answered with escalation, atrocity justified retaliation, but precision, measured, disciplined, morally framed, undermined our narrative. Across conclave territory, similar strikes unfolded. Military leadership compounds disabled through coordinated cyber infiltration and orbital insertion. Hyperlane relay stations reprogrammed to delay fleet movements without collapsing civilian transit. They crippled our war machine while preserving our societies. In emergency session, the Grand Conclave descended into accusation. You exposed propulsion schematics during joint fleet exercises. Your species failed to secure battlefield wreckage. Your cyber defenses were compromised long before this war. Ancient rivalries resurfaced like tectonic fault lines under pressure. Species that had cooperated for centuries began calculating individual survival probabilities separate from collective outcome. Unity, our greatest strength, fractured. I observed the chamber as voices escalated into overlapping frequencies of blame. The same chamber that had unanimously voted to enslave Earth now trembled with distrust. Meanwhile, human fleets expanded operations with surgical calm. They avoided heavily defended core worlds. Instead, they struck choke points, resource hubs, refueling depots, strategic shipyards. Each strike reduced our capacity to wage prolonged war. They were not seeking territorial gain. They were engineering deterrence. A new broadcast pierced every known frequency band. Civilian, military, encrypted, archaic analog channels long abandoned by modern species. The signal was human, unmistakable. It carried no encryption, no obfuscation, just a clear visual of Earth rotating against the darkness, its oceans shimmering beneath solar light. A voice followed, neither enraged nor triumphant. You chose domination, we choose survival. That was all. The transmission repeated for 6 standard cycles, then ceased. Across conclave space, civilian populations began questioning official narratives. Humanity had not initiated hostilities. Humanity had not bombarded cities. Humanity had not deployed extermination weapons. We had. Our first assault on Mars, our attempted planetary bombardments, our vote. The moral calculus shifted. More alarming still were updated military projections. Human adaptation curves no longer trended toward parity. They exceeded it. Hybridized warships constructed from amalgamated conclave alloys and Terran design philosophy defied classification. They possessed redundant propulsion cores capable of partial function even after catastrophic damage. Their AI-assisted targeting systems integrated battlefield data from every prior engagement, evolving strategies in real time. In one devastating encounter near the Tellurian Forge Ring, a human fleet feigned retreat through a narrow hyperspace corridor known for gravitational instability. Our pursuing task force followed, confident in superior shielding. Mid-transition, the corridor destabilized. Human vessels adjusted trajectory by microseconds, calculations derived from propulsion modifications we ourselves had dismissed as too dangerous. Our ships did not. 4 dreadnoughts were lost to spatial shear. The corridor collapsed. Human vessels emerged intact on the far side. They had weaponized our own caution. By the time comprehensive damage assessments reached the Conclave, the strategic balance had shifted beyond comfortable denial. We no longer controlled escalation. We reacted. For the first time in Conclave history, outer systems requested independent defense pacts without central authorization. Peripheral alliances questioned whether remaining unified under a fractured council increased or decreased their survival odds. Humanity's greatest victory was not technological, it was psychological. They forced us to confront a reality we never prepared for, an equal. We had always expanded outward against species technologically inferior or culturally divided. Resistance collapsed under superior firepower or internal discord.
Humanity offered neither. They were unified by threat, strengthened by pressure, disciplined in retaliation. As debates within the chamber grew increasingly volatile, a final intelligence projection illuminated the chamber's central holographic display. If current trajectories continued, if human adaptation maintained present velocity, Conclave fleet superiority would erode completely within 10 standard cycles. After that, projections became uncertain. Uncertainty is the first symptom of lost dominance. I replayed the original vote archive in my private chambers. The confidence, the assumption that a younger species must inevitably submit to ancient authority. We had believed ourselves architects of order. Instead, we had catalyzed evolution. Reports from the frontier confirmed what some of us had begun to fear. Human fleets were no longer confined to defensive perimeters. They were establishing forward staging grounds beyond Sol. Not colonies, outposts. Strategic, measured, permanent. The war had left their star, and the galaxy would never again assume Earth was isolated. As I concluded my observation log, a final alert pulsed across my neural interface, classified at the highest tier. A newly constructed Terran flagship had been detected near the edge of Conclave core territory. Its energy signature exceeded any previous human vessel by a factor of 3, and it was not alone. We had voted to enslave a world. Now that world stood at our gates, and for the first time since the Conclave's founding, we were no longer certain who held the chains. Our greatest miscalculation was not arrogance, it was assumption. We assumed that once humanity reached technological parity, their growth would stabilize, that equilibrium would impose natural limits, that innovation, like all things, would slow when survival no longer demanded desperation. We did not understand them. Wartime did not exhaust human ingenuity, it accelerated it. Intercepted research metrics revealed production curves that defied predictive modeling. Laboratories buried beneath Earth's oceans and Martian regolith operated without pause. Civilian universities, once dedicated to philosophy, art, and theoretical abstraction, shifted entirely to applied physics and weapons engineering. They did not divert resources from culture, they weaponized culture. Open collaboration networks allowed millions of minds to iterate designs in parallel. Failures were archived instantly, successes disseminated globally within minutes. There were no proprietary barriers, no restricted knowledge silos. War erased internal competition. Desperation became fuel.
Their experimental propulsion divisions achieved what our own engineers had deemed unstable: controlled singularity folding within compact drive cores. Human vessels no longer required extended hyperspace corridors. They carved microfolds in space-time itself, executing tactical translations inside gravity wells once considered inaccessible. They appeared where physics said they should not. Worse still were their energy weapons. Traditional conclave shielding relied on harmonic predictability, fixed frequency matrices optimized against known plasma and kinetic spectrums. Human engineers developed what our analysts termed frequency chaos algorithms, weapon systems that shifted emission signatures thousands of times per second, forcing shields into perpetual recalibration. Defensive harmonics lagged by microseconds. Microseconds were enough. The day Earth advanced beyond parity began at Alpha Centauri. This system housed one of our primary fleet assembly hubs, a staging ground safely distant from Sol, or so we believed. 3 conclave dreadnoughts patrolled its perimeter, accompanied by carrier escorts and orbital defense platforms. When the Terran flagship emerged from folded space, it did so alone. At first, our commanders interpreted it as desperation, an overextended show of bravado. Its silhouette defied classification: angular but fluid, hull plating interwoven with alloys derived from multiple conclave species, energy readings fluctuating beyond established baselines. We initiated broadcast. The engagement would be recorded and disseminated as proof of inevitable human defeat. Instead, it became instruction. The flagship moved with impossible precision. Microfolds repositioned it between volleys, bypassing predictive targeting grids. Its shields did not absorb energy, they refracted it, dispersing impact vectors across adaptive lattice nodes. Our first dreadnought fired a concentrated plasma lance calibrated to overwhelm any known Terran defenses. The beam struck. The flagship's hull shimmered, and the energy bent. Not reflected, redirected. The redirected surge impacted the dreadnought's own shield matrix at a destabilizing angle. Harmonic overload cascaded across its defensive grid. Within seconds, the vessel's reactor containment failed. The explosion illuminated the system. 2 dreadnoughts remained. They adjusted formation, triangulating fire from opposing vectors to eliminate escape trajectories. The flagship did not retreat. It advanced. Frequency chaos emissions erupted from its forward batteries, streams of energy modulating beyond our shield's recalibration capacity. Defensive matrices flickered under the strain. Microfractures propagated along hull seams engineered centuries prior under assumptions of predictable threat models. One dreadnought lost propulsion. The other lost targeting coherence as its command AI succumbed to cyber intrusion, human code infiltrating through shield oscillation feedback loops. In less than 9 minutes, 3 conclave dreadnoughts were disabled. The Terran flagship sustained superficial damage. And then, mid-conflict, it opened communication channels. Our commanders expected triumphalism, demands for surrender. Instead, a human admiral appeared on shared projection, a calm expression framed by the quiet hum of their bridge. "We will not advance further into this system. We will not target civilian infrastructure. We will not pursue disabled vessels." A pause. "But this engagement demonstrates capacity." Capacity, not conquest. Then came the terms: immediate revocation of the enslavement decree, formal recognition of Terran sovereignty, permanent abolition of forced subjugation protocols within conclave charter. Not surrender, reform. The broadcast concluded without threat. The Terran flagship withdrew, executing a singularity fold that left only residual gravitational distortion behind. Across conclave space, the engagement replayed on civilian networks. What had begun as propaganda transformed into revelation. Humanity no longer fought for survival alone. They fought for principle. Within the Grand Conclave chamber, fracture lines deepened. Escalation advocates demanded deployment of sterilization arsenals. Crush them now, they argued, before superiority becomes dominance. Others,
facing mounting economic collapse from disrupted trade routes and destroyed shipyards, urged negotiation. Fleet replacement rates lagged behind loss projections. Civil unrest intensified across multiple systems. For the first time in recorded galactic history, dominant civilizations experienced something unfamiliar: fear of a younger species. And humanity had not invaded our core worlds. They had not bombarded our capitals. They had not executed retaliatory extermination strikes. They did not need to. Capability in interstellar politics is power. They had demonstrated it conclusively. A private intelligence briefing circulated among senior delegates, restricted to highest clearance. It projected a grim possibility. If human innovation continued at current acceleration, technological divergence would widen irreversibly within 5 cycles. We would not merely lose parity, we would fall behind. As debates raged, another alert surfaced, this one quieter, more insidious. Human diplomatic envoys had initiated back-channel communications with peripheral conclave species, those historically marginalized within our hierarchy. They offered technology-sharing agreements, mutual defense frameworks, equal representation in any post-war governance structure. They were not dismantling us solely through warfare. They were reshaping alliances. Unity, once our greatest advantage, became our vulnerability. I revisited the Alpha Centauri footage in isolation. Frame by frame, I studied the Terran flagship's maneuvers. Not reckless, not vengeful. Measured, confident, restrained. They had chosen not to press advantage. Why? Because the demonstration was sufficient. The war had crossed an invisible threshold. We could no longer assume eventual dominance through attrition. We could no longer rely on psychological intimidation. We could no longer pretend the enslavement vote was a manageable political error. We had forged an equal, and equals do not submit. As emergency session convened once more, a final transmission arrived from Earth, unprompted. It contained no ultimatum, only a simple statement appended to the Alpha Centauri engagement log. This is what survival looks like. The chamber fell silent. Outside, across dozens of systems, our fleets recalibrated for possibilities we had never contemplated. If escalation continued, destruction would be mutual. If negotiation proceeded, the conclave would never again stand
unchallenged. For the first time in our shared history, dominance was optional. Coexistence was necessary. And as voting protocols prepared for reconsideration of the enslavement decree, I understood that the true battlefield had shifted from stars to ideology. Humanity had advanced. The question now was whether we could. Empires do not fall in fire. They fall in doubt. The first signs were economic. Subtle fractures in trade matrices, once considered immutable. Hyperlane toll revenues declined as convoys rerouted around contested corridors. Peripheral systems delayed tribute shipments, citing security uncertainty. Insurance algorithms recalculated risk factors for any vessel operating under conclave insignia. War was no longer distant. It was expensive. Across our territories, civilian populations began asking a question that had never before required justification. Why? Why had we provoked total war against a species that had not attacked us? Why had we voted for enslavement rather than alliance? Official statements cited precaution, strategic foresight, containment of a volatile civilization. But the truth, buried within sealed conclave archives, was less dignified. Fear. We feared their adaptability. We feared their emotional volatility, the way humans bonded fiercely, fought fiercely, innovated fiercely. We feared their explosive growth curves, their refusal to accept imposed ceilings. We feared that one day they would rival us. So we chose to control them before they could. Now we could not control them at all. The revelation did not come through diplomatic confession. It came through breach.
Human cyber offensives infiltrated conclave archival vaults, repositories secured for millennia against internal corruption and external espionage. Encryption layers collapsed not under brute force, but under elegant logic exploits that revealed structural arrogance within our own systems. Then, the archives were released. Everywhere. The original vote transcript, the language labeling humanity as containment priority, the economic projections detailing forced labor integration, the risk assessments acknowledging that Earth had committed no hostile act, broadcast across civilian networks in raw, unedited form. We had not been defending ourselves. We had been preemptively conquering. Civil unrest ignited. In the Varelian core, protest flotillas gathered outside planetary governance spires, demanding leadership resignations. On Talarian industrial worlds, labor guilds halted production, refusing to construct additional warships for what they now termed a war of pride. Alliances dissolved overnight. Species long resentful of conclave hierarchy questioned why they should continue sacrificing resources for an agenda rooted in fear rather than necessity. Unity unraveled. And through it all, human fleets held position. They occupied strategic choke points along major hyperspace arteries, positions from which they could have severed supply to entire sectors. Their warships hovered near critical shipyards, close enough to strike. They did not. No cities burned. No planetary atmospheres ignited. No retaliatory sterilization strikes answered our earlier bombardments. They could have devastated us. They did not. This restraint altered everything. The narrative we had crafted, humanity as unstable aggressor, as future tyrant, collapsed beneath observable reality. They targeted military infrastructure. They exposed truth. They refrained from vengeance. We had sought domination. They demanded sovereignty. The moral ground shifted beneath our many feet. In emergency session, the Grand Conclave reconvened, not in triumphal confidence, but in visible fracture. Delegates avoided one another's gaze. Communication nodes flickered with secure side-channel negotiations as species calculated independent survival strategies. Calls for escalation weakened. Calls for accountability strengthened. Some demanded formal admission of error. Others warned that admitting fault would embolden humanity further. Still others, those whose economies teetered on collapse, advocated immediate revocation of the enslavement decree regardless of pride. Pride, such a fragile foundation for war. I reviewed civilian sentiment analyses from across our territories. Fear no longer centered on human fleets. It centered on us. Citizens feared leadership blinded by arrogance, feared annihilation triggered by stubborn refusal to adapt, feared becoming collateral damage in a war that now seemed unnecessary. Human psychological warfare had achieved its objective without firing a shot. They had shown our populations who initiated aggression. They had forced introspection, and introspection is corrosive to unquestioned authority. Then came the final blow to conclave confidence. A coordinated human transmission interrupted our emergency session. Not a hack, a formal diplomatic request for address. Silence fell across the chamber. After cycles of defiance, of escalation rhetoric, of dismissive analysis, we hesitated. Permission was granted. The projection resolved into the image of Earth's ambassador, the same human female who had acknowledged our vote without protest cycles earlier. She appeared unchanged, composed, eyes steady. Behind her, Earth's blue curvature rotated slowly, unscarred by vengeance. "You have seen our capacity," she began. Her voice carried neither triumph nor rage. "You have seen our restraint." Data streams displayed casualty counts on both sides, transparent, unfiltered. "You feared what we might become, so you attempted to decide our fate for us." A pause. "We will not accept chains." No theatrics, no dramatic flourish. "We are prepared to continue this war if necessary, but understand this: every escalation you choose will be answered with adaptation." The chamber remained silent. "You may revoke your decree, recognize our sovereignty,
reform the structures that made this conflict possible. Another pause, shorter, heavier. Or you may test how far survival can take us. The transmission ended. No threats, no countdown, just certainty. Around me, delegates shifted, carapaces scraping stone, energy fields flickering with unstable oscillation. For the first time in conclave history, no immediate rebuttal followed a challenge, because none of us could confidently win it. We believed humanity reckless, yet they demonstrated discipline. We believed them volatile, yet they displayed consistency. We believed ourselves superior, yet we were unraveling. The collapse of arrogance was not marked by explosion or conquest. It was marked by realization. We initiated a war to prevent a hypothetical future threat. In doing so, we had created a present equal. Trade routes faltered, alliances dissolved, citizens demanded reform. Military projections warned of prolonged attrition we could not economically sustain. And still, human fleets waited, holding positions of advantage, refraining from annihilation. Mercy, when unexpected, is more destabilizing than cruelty. As deliberations resumed, I felt something unfamiliar permeate the chamber. Not anger, not pride, even not hatred. Fear, not of extinction, but of transformation. Because to end this war on human terms would require more than revoking a decree. It would require admitting that our model of galactic order, dominance through preemption, had failed. The vote to enslave Earth once united us in arrogance. Now, the possibility of rescinding it divided us in shame. And as final ballots were prepared for reconsideration, I understood that whatever decision emerged next would redefine more than political alliances. It would redefine who we were. The chamber lights dimmed for formal vote initiation. No longer defiant, no longer confident, only afraid. And somewhere beyond our borders, humanity waited, not with weapons raised, but with history watching. The final emergency summit did not resemble the first. There were no luminous projections of expansion, no simulations of Earth partitioned into labor zones, no confident declarations of inevitable compliance. Instead, the Grand Conclave chamber flickered with casualty statistics. Fleet loss percentages rotated in cold numerical columns. Economic collapse charts traced downward spirals across once stable systems. Influence maps, once dominated by Conclave insignia, now displayed Terran expanding operational reach, not as territorial conquest, but as strategic presence. The atmosphere was not triumphant, it was exhausted. One by one, species representatives requested the floor. The Varelian delegate spoke first, voice stripped of former condescension. In light of current projections and public disclosure of original vote intent, we rescind our approval of the enslavement decree. A murmur followed. The Talarian war minister, who once demanded sterilization, lowered his crest in visible concession. Our continued participation in this conflict threatens systemic stability. We withdraw support. One by one, rescission after rescission. No grand speeches, no attempts to preserve pride, just acknowledgement. When the final tally illuminated above us, the result was unanimous. The enslavement decree was revoked.
For cycles, we had framed this moment as a concession to strategic necessity, but as the vote crystal dimmed, I recognized it for what it truly was, admission of error. Yet revocation alone did not end war. Human fleets still held our choke points. Our economies remained destabilized. Trust, once fractured, does not reassemble through procedural reversal. And so something unprecedented occurred. The conclave drafted a petition. Not a demand, a petition. It requested formal audience with Earth under terms of negotiated cessation. The language was precise: non-retaliation guarantees, restoration of trade corridors, establishment of mutual defense pacts against external threats, reparations for damage inflicted during initial assault. We offered tribute, technological exchange, resource concessions, diplomatic reform. It was not lost on any delegate that such offerings mirrored terms once imposed upon lesser civilizations. Now we extended them in humility. When the transmission reached Earth, response time was measured, deliberate, no immediate acceptance, no opportunistic escalation. Hours passed. Then the projection field activated. Earth's ambassador appeared once more. Behind her this time stood not military officers, but civilian representatives, scientists, cultural figures. Humanity presented itself as a society, not merely a war machine. "We acknowledge the revocation," she began. Her tone remained steady, neither gloating nor cold. "You seek guarantees, so do we." Data panels illuminated across the chamber, human demands clearly structured. Abolition of forced subjugation policies across all conclave species. Permanent amendment of charter to prohibit collective preemptive enslavement votes. Full Terran representation within conclave governance, equal in authority. Creation of safeguards, procedural and technological, to prevent coordinated aggression against any emerging civilization without verified hostile action. They did not demand tribute. They did not demand territory. They demanded change. The chamber processed the implications in silence. These reforms would dismantle centuries of hierarchical structure. Species long accustomed to dominance would relinquish unilateral authority. Peripheral civilizations would gain protective status previously denied. It was not mere peace negotiation, it was systemic transformation. Some delegates hesitated, not from defiance, but from uncertainty. Could the conclave survive such restructuring? Would authority diffuse into inefficiency? Would rivalries intensify without centralized dominance? But the alternative loomed larger. Continued war against a species that adapted faster than we could escalate. And beyond strategic calculus lay something more uncomfortable. They were right. Our vote had not been defensive necessity. It had been fear-driven control. After cycles of debate, this time absent arrogance, the motion to codify reforms entered formal ballot. Votes illuminated the chamber once more. Unanimous. The conclave charter amended. Forced subjugation policies abolished. Humanity recognized as sovereign equal. And with that vote, the war ended. Not in surrender, not in conquest, but in redefinition. Human fleets withdrew from choke points gradually, coordinating restoration of disrupted trade corridors. Joint engineering teams began repairing damaged hyperlane relays. Medical aid flowed both directions, to conclave worlds struck during counteroffensives and to Terran colonies scarred by our initial bombardments. There was no parade, no declaration of victory, only reconstruction. In private archive logs, I reviewed the trajectory from first vote to final reform. We had sought to prevent a future threat. Instead, we had triggered a present evolution, our own. Humanity had not conquered our territories, they had conquered our certainty. They had exposed flaws within our governance and forced us to confront them under pressure we could not ignore. Their greatest weapon was not singularity drives or chaos algorithms. It was resilience paired with restraint. They demonstrated capacity for destruction, then chose reform. They demonstrated superiority in adaptation, then offered coexistence. As reconstruction began and diplomatic channels stabilized, I found myself considering a thought once unthinkable. Perhaps the conclave had stagnated. Centuries of dominance had dulled introspection. We expanded outward, controlled potential rivals, justified actions through tradition. Humanity disrupted that pattern. They refused to be managed. They demanded equity. And by doing so, they forced us to evolve beyond comfortable supremacy. In the final session before adjournment, the High Arbiter, voice quieter than I had ever recorded,
addressed the chamber. Let this war be recorded not as defeat, but as correction. It was an attempt at dignity. Yet I understood the deeper truth. We had not begged for survival alone. We had begged for forgiveness. And humanity, astonishingly, had offered something rarer than mercy. They had offered partnership, conditional upon change. As the chamber lights dimmed and delegates dispersed to rebuild fractured systems, I found my concluding official record with a realization that still unsettles me. We voted to enslave Earth. Instead, we liberated ourselves from the illusion that dominance equals security. Humanity had not conquered us, they had forced us to evolve. And in that evolution, the galaxy itself began anew. Years have passed since the emergency war session. The chamber has changed. Where once hung conquest banners, now stand shared insignias, Terran blue interwoven with conclave gold. The architecture remains ancient, but its purpose has shifted. No longer a council of dominance, it is a forum of negotiation. I record this testimony as part of the revised conclave archives under the Charter of Equal Sovereignty. Humanity now sits among us, not as subordinates, not as conquerors, as equals. Their delegates occupy the same tiered platforms once denied to emergent species. Their fleets patrol shared borders alongside former adversaries. Their engineers collaborate with those who once targeted their worlds. Their diplomats speak with calm confidence, measured and precise. They remember what we tried to do. That is the detail many preferred to ignore.
They remember the vote, the simulations of forced labor integration, the sterilization contingencies, the projected timelines for cultural erasure. Human memory, we have learned, is both durable and instructive. And yet, despite possessing every justification for retaliation, they chose partnership over vengeance. I often replay the moment of that first vote. The chamber then was radiant with certainty. Data projections predicted manageable resistance. Behavioral models labeled humans as emotionally volatile and strategically short-sighted. We interpreted their internal conflicts as weakness. We mistook diversity for division. We mistook debate for fragility. We mistook compassion for vulnerability. The defining trait of humanity, we believed, was aggression. After all, their history, when analyzed in isolation, appeared saturated with warfare, territorial disputes, resource conflicts, ideological clashes, entire planetary wars preceding unified governance. We studied their violence. We failed to understand their resilience. When threatened externally, they unified at speeds our sociologists had not predicted. Former rivals synchronized fleets, competing governments pooled intelligence, civilian industries restructured into defense networks within cycles. When attacked, they adapted. Every engagement with our forces resulted in tactical evolution. Electronic countermeasures adjusted mid-conflict. Supply chains rerouted around blockades. Civilian populations hardened infrastructure faster than our simulations allowed. They learned in motion. When victorious, they rebuilt. This was the trait that altered everything. After pushing our fleets from their orbitals, they did not pursue annihilation. After crippling our logistics, they did not sever life support routes. After demonstrating technological superiority, they did not demand tribute. They opened communication. We had expected fury. We encountered restraint. In the years since reform, I have observed Terran representatives in dozens of joint initiatives. Along the Draveth corridor, human and Talarian patrol vessels operate in synchronized rotations, sharing sensor telemetry in real time. In former Varelian industrial zones, Terran sustainability engineers have assisted in converting extraction-based economies into regenerative systems. They do not posture, they participate. There remains tension, of course. Trust fractured by attempted enslavement does not restore effortlessly. Some conclave citizens still whisper that humanity waits patiently for an opportunity to dominate in subtler ways. I have found no evidence of such design. What I have found instead is vigilance. Humans advocate relentlessly for the reforms they demanded. They monitor enforcement of anti-subjugation statutes. They intervene diplomatically when emerging civilizations face coercion from larger powers. Not as enforcers, as witnesses. They insist that the law apply equally, even to themselves. This is perhaps what unsettles many of us most. They hold power, but they bind it. In private sessions, I have conversed with the Terran ambassador who addressed us during the war. Her demeanor remains composed, her speech deliberate. I once inquired why Earth did not extract heavier reparations when leverage was absolute. Her response was brief, because we remember being weaker. That memory shapes them. It informs their policy, their military doctrine, their diplomacy. Strength to humanity is not domination. It is endurance with principle intact. We misjudged that. We assumed the most dangerous species in the galaxy would be the one most eager to wield power. We were wrong. The most dangerous species is the one that survives everything. Consider the variables: environmental volatility on their homeworld, climatic extremes, geological instability, predatory ecosystems, internal ideological fragmentation, technological acceleration outpacing cultural cohesion. They endured all of it. They fractured and reformed, collapsed and rebuilt. They absorbed catastrophe into narrative and emerged with stronger institutions. We interpreted that history as chaos. It was training. When we attacked, we became merely another crisis, and humanity responded as they always had, through unity, adaptation, and reconstruction. Years later, Earth's presence within the conclave has altered decision-making in subtle but profound ways. Preemptive aggression proposals now encounter rigorous ethical scrutiny. Economic exploitation models are re-examined through sustainability metrics influenced by Terran frameworks. The culture of inevitability, once dominant, has weakened. In its place is deliberation. That transformation is their quiet victory. We voted to enslave Earth. Now we study them instead. Our academics analyze Terran conflict resolution models. Our strategists examine their distributed command structures. Our sociologists research the psychological mechanisms that allow disparate populations to align under existential threat. But beyond academic curiosity lies something deeper: respect. Not born from fear of their fleets, though those remain formidable, born from recognition of their restraint. In my final archival entry regarding the war, I wrote that humanity forced us to evolve. I understand now that evolution was not imposed, it was offered. They demonstrated a path: strength without subjugation, security without oppression, vigilance without cruelty. We chose to follow because the alternative had failed. As I conclude this testimony, I review once more the record of that first vote: the arrogance, the certainty, the assumption that superiority granted moral license. We feared humanity because we believed them dangerous. We were correct, but not for the reasons we thought. They are dangerous to stagnation, dangerous to tyranny, dangerous to systems built on domination, because they survive, and having survived, they choose mercy anyway. That is the species we feared, and now it is the species we stand beside.